Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm excited to share with you some of my contemplations and reflections to assist you in feeling into how you want to shape and how you want to approach the coming week. And I invite you, as always, to begin by calling back all of your energy. Calling back all of your energy from different places, different relationships, different technologies even that you've been engaging with, different places, and to start listening within and trusting that as you're listening to my words, as you're listening to these reflections and contemplations, whatever you hear arising from within, those are exactly the information that you need for the coming week for you. All right. So let's begin with the astrology. On Monday, February 5th, Mercury enters Aquarius, and then Mercury will conjoin Pluto in Aquarius. On Tuesday the 6th, Venus in Capricorn will square the nodes in Aries and Libra axis. And then we also have the Sun sextiling the North Node, trining the South Node. On Wednesday the 7th, Venus in Capricorn will trine Uranus in Taurus. Mercury in Capricorn will sextile Neptune in Pisces. On Thursday the 8th, the Sun in Aquarius will square Uranus in Taurus. On Friday the 9th, we have a new moon in Aquarius. And this new moon in Aquarius squares Uranus in Taurus. And then on Saturday the 10th, Mercury in Aquarius will square Jupiter in Taurus. And so as you can see, we have a pretty busy week, and especially during these busy weeks astrologically, there are two ways that we can approach this, right, as people who look at astrology. One way to look at it is to observe each transit separately and then sort of paint a bigger picture from the smaller pieces. This is what I call the mercurial approach to looking at transits. Or we can take a step back and we can look at the larger patterns, which is more of the Jupiterian approach. Personally, for me, I like the Jupiterian approach a little bit better, especially for these contemplations, because this particular space is one where we talk about the collective energies, right? And so when we're talking about the collective energies, already some subtle nuances and specific details are going to be omitted, right? That's just the nature of me as one person speaking more to the collective. And so this particular contemplation is going to be a lot more big picture. It's going to be less specific, because what I invite you to do is to really find your own narratives within these larger patterns. As you're listening to me share about these larger patterns that are happening in the cosmic collective, so to speak, it's very likely that you start finding yourself drifting and thinking about your own life, right? And thinking about your own circumstances, whatever it is that you have been working through. And you'll start to hopefully see your problems in a new way, or in a deeper way, or to find solutions that you didn't even consider before, right? And none of this will necessarily be related directly to what I'm about to say, right? Because everything that I'm going to be sharing here is more about the patterns. It's more about the larger forces, the dynamics that are at play, right? There may be a part of you that's like, is that what Jonathan's even talking about? And that's incredible, right? I highly encourage you to trust that process for this particular episode. And when we look at the larger patterns, we can also look at the signs that are participating in the energy of the week, right? And of course, because signs are landscapes, right, that are within the domain or rulership of the planets, there are also going to be planetary flavors that are activated as a side effect of the signs being activated, right? And then on top of that, as an astrologer, I also look at the planets that are creating the aspects. And then I filter it down into how this collective cosmic dance feels to me in my body, right, in my energetic system. And then I try to share what I think will be useful for myself and for others in considering the cosmic soup, right? So when we look at the larger pattern, there are a lot of fixed sign activations. Specifically this week, we have Aquarius and Taurus activations, right? And that general traffic, shall we say, is colored by a dash of cardinal energy, with Venus squaring the nodes and the Sun will be sextiling / trining the nodes, right? And therefore, Venus and the Sun will be activating the Aries-Libra axis, right? It's also worth noting that from the perspective of the planets, this week is very Saturn and Venus dominant, right? Aquarius is a sign that's ruled by Saturn. Taurus is a sign ruled by Venus. And on top of that, we have Venus squaring the nodes, right? And then we have the new moon, where the sun and the moon are in Aquarius, right? And so all of this is already painting a certain picture for us, right? We know we're working with a lot of fixed energy, with a dash of cardinal. So maybe we'll be working with long-standing patterns from a new perspective, right? Things that we have already known, things that we've been working with perhaps for pretty much all of our lives, maybe. And then we may be seeing them in a new light. We may be seeing them from a new perspective. Or we may be creating new containers to deal with, to relate to these long-standing patterns, right? There is a little bit of a cardinal leg up for the fixed patterns that we've been dealing with, that are kind of coming to the surface. And then on top of that, there's also this kind of juxtaposition, right, of the relative slowness and rootedness of Saturn and the sensations, right, the somatic medicine of Venus. There's something about taking pleasure in processes that are slower, processes that are more foundational, less of a quick fix, and more of an architectural tinkering, right? It's less about the trash needs to be taken out and more about, okay, we haven't shifted the configuration of our living room for a while. Let's try to imagine, right, what it would look like if you move the couch to this side of the wall, right, so to speak. And so what I will also add here about Venus and Saturn that I think is fascinating is Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn, right, whereas Venus rules Libra and Taurus. And so both Saturn and Venus rule air signs and earth signs. And so if you look at it from the perspective of the different pairs that we can create from these signs, right? If you look at Libra and Aquarius, they form a trine, right? Which is a harmonious aspect. If you look at Taurus and Capricorn, they also form a trine, another harmonious aspect. But then when you look at Libra and Capricorn, right, that's a square. And then when you look at Aquarius and Taurus, that's a square, right? And so when I think about Saturn and Venus, there is The word that's coming up for me is there's harmony in tension, and there's also synergy in disagreements, right? There's something about how when we get to the hard place, that's often when we realize ease has always been accessible to us, right? It's making me think about, for example, things like experiencing certain pain that's tension related, right? If you have been working and you've been holding a certain posture that's not really great for you, you may eventually start feeling pain in your physical body. And often that pain, which is in the realm of Saturn, right, is uncomfortable, is not something that you want to be working with or dealing with, right? But sometimes in experiencing that pain, it may open your awareness to a better posture that's available to you, right? A more easeful way of being with the hard things that you may not have necessarily been aware of before you experience the pain. So there's something here about pain and relaxation, right? Tension and relaxation that I think is present in the energy of the astrology. And finally, I want to also layer in the fact that essentially all week long, we will be approaching a new moon, right? And the new moon will happen at the end of the week. So in a way, we're working with third quarter lunar energy, right? Third quarter moon energy. We're approaching the dark moon period. So there's something here about releasing, about completing a process or a sub-chapter within the larger chapter of that process in order to kind of come to a void place, right? And from this place of the void, you may find that there's new life beginning to sprout from here. So I want to break this down a little bit further by talking about the fixed signs. Fixed signs to me are not so much about initiating new processes, right? Those are the function of the cardinal signs. They're also not necessarily about reinventing the wheel or redistributing, rearranging energetic and tangible resources into new shapes and new funnels, right? Which are what the mutable signs are about. The process of the fixed signs has to do more with removing obstacles around seeing, acknowledging, and ultimately deepening into what has always been there. Specifically, when we think about the genius of Aquarius and Taurus, so much of it has to do with being willing to see what's already here for us. Aquarius teaches us that sometimes the solutions are right there in front of our eyes, right? We didn't have to do anything extra, but we do have to weave a new relationship with what's in front of us, with what has always been, in order to be able to create a new path forward, right? Aquarius is a sign that's ruled by Saturn, and it comes after Capricorn, right? Aquarius is about having learned all the rules, and then you know all the limitations of the rules, and so you start creating your own path. You start realizing that the problem that's in front of you doesn't actually have a premeditated solution. There's no template for the solution for this problem because the solution is emergent. The solution is in the problem, and the solution is created through deep intimacy, deep relationship with the problem, right? Something that I think we can sometimes get a little bit confused about, and this is, I think, part of the understanding that comes from modern astrology. And I want to be very clear here, I am not poo-pooing on modern astrology, right? I would consider my practice to also be very influenced by modern astrology. But in modern astrology, we think about Aquarius as being ruled by Uranus. And while I think there's something that feels very resonant about that on some level, when we want to look at Aquarius, I think it's really important to also take into consideration the fact that the traditional ruler of Aquarius is Saturn, right? And so, what is this combination of Saturn and Uranus, right? Saturn as the planet of the status quo, right? As the planet of the structure, as a planet that speaks to the liminal. And then Uranus that speaks to shakeups, to revolution, to dreaming new ways out of nowhere, right? There's something here that I think is really interesting about the process of Aquarius, which is that with Aquarius, oftentimes on the outside, it can look like rebellion. On the outside, it can look like charting a new path for the sake of newness, right? Aquarius is sometimes talked about as being iconoclastic, right? There's kind of a rebellious quality to Aquarius. But it's important to understand with the traditional rulership of Aquarius being ruled by Saturn, there's something here about really understanding and internalizing and digesting why Aquarius goes against the grain, right? Aquarius doesn't just go against the grain for the sake of being cool, right? At its core, Aquarius goes against the grain because it has understood and learned all the rules and come to a conclusion that none of these precedents will actually work. So we will need to come up with a new solution, right? Or sometimes it also, when I think about Aquarius, sometimes I think about, someone who has learned all the rules, right? All the words, the vocabularies of a particular language, and then started to create something totally new, something totally unprecedented. Think about someone like Gertrude Stein, for example, right? Someone who clearly has deep understanding of the English language, but then created these works that are absurd, right? Seemingly absurd, because they are trying something new, right? They've seen it all and they want to see a new path because they've learned all the rules. And meanwhile, when we look at Taurus, Taurus teaches us that the pathway to seeing solutions is to be present with our experiences now, right? That often the solutions come from rooting into our bodies, rooting into sensations, rooting into the earth, getting grounded in the present moment, right? Rather than coming up and out, considering all the mental what ifs, and making up stories about the past or the future, Taurus asks us, what's here now? What are you feeling in the body? What are you seeing or noticing in your environment? What's here in the situations that are present in front of us? So something that I have seen from doing client sessions is that when there are a lot of planets configured in fixed signs, whether by transit or in someone's natal chart, often the temptation is to run away from the discomfort, right? Fixed signs are teachers, and what they try to teach us is that we do know. We do know deep down what is true for us. We do know deep down the direction we're supposed to go to. We do know deep down how we want things to look and feel like. And yet, sometimes it takes a long time. It takes a lot of persistence to get there. In order to realize our visions, we need to lay the groundwork externally. We need to face our internal fears, our internal judgment, our trauma, emotional blocks of some kind. We need to shift ourselves into the right frame of mind, and then we need to approach things with the right attitude, right? The right energy, the right vitality, right? And even then, some issues, some problems, some concerns they won't just magically disappear, right? We still need to put in the work, the time, and the energy, and handle the obstacles kind of one step at a time, right? Persevere with this process of constantly tweaking and constantly coming back to the essence in a spiralic manner, right? And so the process of the fixed signs take time. They take fortitude of character. When we think about the Aquarian ideal, one image to conjure up is a society where differences are not only celebrated, but actually allowed, right, to contribute to the betterment of the whole, to contribute to the betterment of the collective. Aquarian consciousness is one that understands that great changes can't happen through individuals taking singular, sporadic action, right? There has to be a certain consensus. There has to be a certain agreement on a larger level so that there's this mass movement towards a specific direction. And this process is, in practice, highly uncomfortable, right? Conceptually, we understand, right, that this is what needs to happen, but usually on a practical level, it's very likely that this process doesn't happen all at once, right? There needs to be different layers within it. In order to create great changes, dramatic changes, very often we need to create one wave after another. And when we think about waves, right, what happens with waves? Waves start and then they peak and then they dissipate, right? And so there's kind of a letdown quality to wave making, right? Wave making doesn't always give us the satisfaction of laying one brick on top of another. Sometimes we create a wave and it seems like we are in a nice little momentum, and then the wave kind of dissipates, right? And then we are left with silence. We are left with, we're back in the quiet land, right? And these great changes, they often move more like a wave rather than a huge rock rolling down the hill until there's enough collective movement, collective little waves, right, to create this huge wave, right? And so if you find yourself in the midst of a change in this moment as you're listening to this, that can only really be completed through a wider network of people or events kind of moving the needle in the same direction, you may find yourself very frustrated, right? From your vantage point, it may feel like change isn't happening fast enough. It may feel like change isn't happening dramatically enough. And this is where balancing the Aquarian, right, the fixed air element of our ideals and our visions, balancing that with the Taurian, right, the somatic, the capacity of the body, becomes so crucial. It becomes non-negotiable. Many of us live within cultures that shame our needs. When the end goal is production and accumulation of resources to infinity, right? It's often not okay for us to say, hey, I'm tired. I need a break. I went on a vacation last year that made me realize how unwilling I was to even say to my partner, hey, I'm tired. Can we sit down and rest for 5 minutes, right? Truth be told, we had the whole day. We had the whole day to explore a city or explore a particular attraction. And I realized, wow, my experience of being in a new place, something that should be so exciting and so life-giving, to even have the privilege to do that, was kind of diminished by my inability to be willing to take a break, right? Sometimes breaks are absolutely necessary in order for us to build something larger, to build something deeper, right? Build something that's more epic in proportion. So what I realized, and this may be relevant to where you are in this moment, was that this really came down to the many instances I had as a child where, for example, when I was in school, if I wanted to use the bathroom in the middle of class, sometimes I wasn't allowed to, right? Or sometimes I was afraid that my teachers would think that I am creating issues where there are none. I didn't want to be branded as the troublemaker, right? And I think many of us had to deal with that. And so notice these patterns where you can feel, if you tune into your body, that you no longer want to be continuing certain processes. Or maybe you need a little bit of a break. Or maybe you need a little distraction, right? But there's this part of your mind that's relentless, that's telling you, no, keep going, right? I think learning to work with that, we're learning to work with the dichotomy, right, of the mind, the spirit having this beautiful drive towards creating and realizing an ideal, and the body needing a break, is what we're being invited to really look into this coming week. Again, like I mentioned, we live in cultures that really shame our needs, right? It's often not, we got the subliminal messages that it's not okay to have needs. So often when our bodies are tired, we continue to push past the limits, right? But the truth is, not only is it okay to stop, in fact, sometimes allowing ourselves to stop, allowing that momentum to stop for a second, or for a week, or for a month, can really give us the long-term stamina necessary to actually execute the vision, right? That our relationship to the vision is healed through us allowing the process of rest, the process of recuperation to happen within the body, right? They're actually not separate, right? The vision and the body, the vision and the structure, the answers and the questions, they're not separate. And so I'm going to leave you with a message that I heard from my guides as I was tuning into this week. The first phrase I heard was to be still. To allow silence to be this agent that helps you notice how you are, that helps you reorient and recenter. And then I also heard, take heart. And what I believe this means is to not allow fear to be leading the way. To instead allow the heart to be the driver of our lives and our existence, right? What happens if we stay rooted in the heart rather than acting or moving from a place of fear and anxiety and urgency? And finally, I also heard to take the time to see what's always been there. And sometimes this can take enormous patience, right? Because when something has been there all along, it can feel really challenging to our ego to actually witness them. Because we've passed by that corner in our house, metaphorically speaking, so many times, right? That for us to finally be able to see that the answer has been lying there this whole time can feel a bit like an ego death. There's a part of our ego that can feel a little bit wounded, from understanding that, the answer has always been there. But that was the message that kind of came through for me, that allowing ourselves to be with what's there will be very nourishing and will be very healing for this coming week. That it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's not about trying to find a new way to do things, but it's really about honoring and appreciating what's always been there. And trusting that even if it doesn't feel like the final draft, it's leading up to it. All right, that's it by way of contemplation. I so appreciate your presence here. Thank you for listening in. Thank you for co-creating this space with me. Thank you for walking your path. If you have enjoyed this offering, I would really appreciate it if you could share it with others, or leave a review. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast on an app, whether that's through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a review or you can leave some stars. I would really, really appreciate that. All right. I'm sending you so much love. I'm sending you deep care, and I wish you a beautiful week.